Hello everyone. Welcome to this tutorial where we are going to discuss the use of ChatGPT, especially in the context of analyzing textual data. For our tutorial today, we draw inspiration from a very well-known fairy tale, a tale as old as time, a song as old as rhyme, The Beauty and the Beast. To suit our narrative of this tutorial, we have modified the title and we are calling it The Beauty and the Bot, ChatGPT's take on skincare recommendations. Now, what exactly is ChatGPT? ChatGPT, by definition, is an advanced AI chatbot. It's developed by OpenAI and uses large language models to hold conversation and to generate human-like text. In addition to that, it can answer questions, generate content like images, debug codes, brainstorm ideas by processing and analyzing massive amounts of data to predict response to user prompts. It was released by OpenAI in 2022, and since then, language models have evolved from basic n-gram word models to recurrent neural networks, and finally, large language models. ChatGPT is based on GPT-5 and is a generative pre-trained transformer. This is a type of large language model which uses essentially a deep learning architecture and is based on semi-supervised and reinforcement learning. Now, in the recent past, since the meteoric rise of the use of ChatGPT among researchers as well as the general public, a lot of articles and blog posts have been written to discuss the use of ChatGPT. For instance, here in this article, the authors are trying to answer the question that what exactly do people actually use ChatGPT for? OpenAI does provide some numbers, which helps us understand the far-reaching impact of ChatGPT in our lives today. In this article, the study breaks down what 700 million users do across 2.6 billion daily GPT messages that are generated. Another application of GPT, which underscores its ability to create contents like images, are the Ghibli images. We are all familiar with the Ghibli fever that had taken over the internet. Thanks to the advanced image generation feature of OpenAI that let people convert their own real images into dreamy hand-drawn portraits, as you see on the slide. Apart from creating images and also helping answer questions that are daily put to ChatGPT, it's also used in order to develop statistical analysis plan. For instance, you would see the snippet on the slide here of a research paper where the authors have written about the use of ChatGPT to develop the statistical analysis plan for a randomized control trial. In another article published in NBER, the authors have simply tried to break down the numbers and understand how exactly people use ChatGPT. And based on the numbers, here are some graphics that help us understand how exactly the numbers have increased over the years for ChatGPT users. If you look at the left panel, we are talking about the number of weekly active ChatGPT users, which, if you notice, in January 2023 was less than 100, and by July 2025, it has crossed 600. On the right-hand side, we have broken down these ChatGPT users by the different reasons for using ChatGPT. So the different colored lines on the right-hand panel are helping us understand exactly what reasons people use ChatGPT for and what percentage of the total ChatGPT users are actually broken down into each of these different headers. For instance, if you look at the green line, it talks about ChatGPT users who are looking for practical guidance, which is about 28.8% of all users. The red line, which says seeking information, this is generally talking about people putting in prompts to seek information about a number of different topics, that's about 24.4% of the total users. And here we are talking about the share of consumer ChatGPT messages broken down by these different headers from 1.1 million sample conversations between May 2024 through June 26, 2025. So, although we see there are different reasons why anyone would want to use ChatGPT, in this particular tutorial, we are going to talk about the use of ChatGPT to analyze textual data, to use ChatGPT to extract metrics from these textual data, which can thereafter be used in recommender systems, in predictive models, and so on and so forth. So, particularly, we are going to talk about customer review data for skincare products from Neutrogena. The dataset contains text and associated metadata from customer feedback, and these are very similar to reviews by customers on other e-commerce sites as well. The analysis of customer review data, which are essentially unstructured textual corpus, are valuable for businesses because it helps understand customer satisfaction, the reasons behind it, and also product performance, and it helps businesses understand the market. This dataset that we will talk about in today's tutorial contains typically the review text, which is a detailed comment or opinion written by a customer about a product. In certain cases, in certain businesses, such as in hospitality, we have customer reviews also written by the services provided. Customer review data also contains the rating, which is essentially a numerical score, often on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, indicating the customer satisfaction level. So, this is a more explicit expression of the customer's satisfaction, whereas the review text helps us extract implicit metrics that also can be used as a surrogate or a proxy for the satisfaction of the customers. We also capture the date the review was written on and product information in the form of metadata. So, details about product being reviewed, the name of the product. If it's coming from Amazon, then the ASIN, which is the Amazon Standard Identification Number, the price, and so on. The implicit data or metrics that can be extracted from a review text, an example could be the sentiments. The sentiment expressed by the reviewer through the textual corpus, and that can be calculated using ChatGPT, and that's what we would see in the course of this tutorial. Now, when we use a textual corpus, we can use ChatGPT with the following objectives. We can use ChatGPT to classify reviews as favorable reviews or unfavorable reviews. depending on the type of emotion or type of sentiment expressed by the customers who have written those reviews. We can also use ChatGPT to generate ranked lists of items based on review sets. We can use it to measure the effect of various influencing factors on ChatGPT's output, and we can also assess the impact of prompting strategies. As I've mentioned before, ChatGPT essentially generates response to the prompts that we as users plug in. So it's very important that the prompt that we provide to ChatGPT is clearly curated so that our requirement is clearly expressed, which makes it easier for the bot to give us a response which is most suitable for our query. So, with the textual data that we have, we are going to look at the sentiment analysis of the text through the use of ChatGPT. Sentiment analysis essentially is a type of classifier, and using the text of the review, it assigns a value to the text which lies anywhere between -1 and 1, with -1 being very negatively sentiment text and +1 is highly positive sentiment text. Most sentiment analysis that we find in extant literature provide information about polarity. More fine-grained information provides association values for the 8 core emotions instead of just breaking up the sentiments into positive and negative, or simply giving us a numeric score between -1 and 1. We can have information about the 8 core emotions, which are based on the word emotion association lexicon. So here is an example of a novel. The different sentiments, such as anger, anticipation, disgust, fear, joy, negative, positive, sadness, surprise, and trust. And from the given novel, through text analysis, we have extracted the words that are related to each of these sentiments, called the sentiment frequencies. We also have a count of the total number of words in the novel, which helps us calculate the percentage. For instance, related to the sentiment anger, we have 1,255 words out of the 76,710 words used in the novel, which makes the percentage of anger sentiment expressed in 1.6% of the text. And likewise, we can interpret the percentage values for each of the different sentiments. And going by the table that we have, we can see about 8.4% of the text has a positive sentiment, followed by negative sentiment, which is about 5.6%, and so on and so forth. On the right-hand panel, we see different novels such as Darwin, Lovecraft, Orwell, and Twain. And for each of them, we see the breakup of the frequencies or the percentage calculated from the frequencies for each of the sentiments. What we can understand from this picture, if we compare between Orwell and Lovecraft, if you look at fear, the percentage of fear expressed in Lovecraft is higher than that expressed in Orwell. Or if we pick up any one of these clusters and look at the frequencies or the percentages from frequencies for each of these different sentiments, we can see which sentiment is expressed the most number of times and which is expressed the least. Here we have a plot which gives us the distribution of negative, neutral, and positive sentiments across these 4 categories. So along the vertical axis, we have the polarity, which is the ratio of positive to negative emotions. And we can see that the ratio is zero point 0.6 for Lovecraft, 0.99 for Orwell, 1.26 for Twain, and 1.51 for Darwin. So, polarity here is the ratio of the number of positive emotion words over the number of negative emotion words, which means for the two cases where this ratio is less than 1, it means that the number of positive emotion words were less than the number of negative emotion words, and vice versa for the ones which are greater than 1. Now, another metric that we can extract from the textual corpus are the subjectivity scores. Essentially, it lies between 0 and 1. A score of 0 indicates a highly objective statement, meaning it expresses only factual information and minimal personal opinion or emotion. Whereas a score of 1 indicates a highly subjective statement, meaning it strongly conveys personal opinions, feelings, or judgments. On the right hand panel, you can see top 5 tweets with the highest polarity scores, and we have the top 5 tweets with the highest polarity and subjectivity scores. Now we are going to talk about prompt engineering, because whether it's calculating the subjectivity or calculating the sentiment polarity using ChatGPT, what's very important for us is to know how to engineer the prompts, how to curate the prompts to get the best possible results from our analysis. So we can improve the performance of our Gen AI bot by providing in context learning, which allows models to learn from the examples if we can embed them into the prompt that we provide. Zero shot is where we give them an instruction such as classify the sentiment of the following text as positive, negative, or neutral. And an example text would be I think vacation was okay. When we provide a zero shot prompt, the GPT understands the text is to be classified as either positive, negative, or neutral. One shot is where we classify the sentiment of the following text as positive, negative, or neutral. And then the text is the product is terrible, sentiment becomes negative. Whereas if we look at the other text, which is I think the vacation was okay, this would generate a more neutral. And a few shot would be when we provide the instruction of classify the sentiment of the following text as positive, negative, and neutral. Then we provide text as an exemplar for negative, the product is terrible, positive, super, helpful, worth it, and a generic text, it doesn't work. Given that we provide the prompt along with these exemplar text, it makes the prompt better for the GPT bot to understand and to accordingly give you a better response. Now we will move on to a hands-on experience of how we can deal with text data through Gen AI, through ChatGPT specifically. And at the end of the tutorial, in case you have any more queries, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact details, the emails are given here on the slide, which would be shared with you. So let's move on to ChatGPT. So this is what the ChatGPT interface looks like. I'm using GPT-5, which has been auto-detected because I have the paid version of GPT. If not, if you are using the free version of ChatGPT, GPT-4o is the version that you would have access to. Now, in order to use ChatGPT for our text analysis, we would first have to provide ChatGPT with the CSV or the Excel file that contains your data. And before we get started, we would like to take a look at the data first. We would want to inspect the data and see what structure it has, because we need to know the names of the columns that we are going to get our metrics from. So it's important to always take a look at the data and understand how it works. So this is the data that we have scraped off of the internet. This data is for skincare products on Neutrogena. We have here a total of 104 reviews extracted for skincare products. We have extracted the review title, which is in the form of text, the actual review text, the review score on a scale of 1 to 5, and we also have the date and time when the review was written. Additionally, there are a couple of other headers, such as reviewer name and the reviewer country code, which has not been populated due to the absence of the data, corresponding data from the reviews that have been scraped. So of interest to us for this tutorial are essentially the textual columns. Specifically, we are looking at the review text. The review titles are short texts which are sometimes missing, but sometimes when extracted and also when we calculate the sentiment and the subjectivity can be quite informative. So let's take you back to ChatGPT. We will start with uploading the data onto ChatGPT. If you click on the plus here, it allows you to add photos or files that you want ChatGPT to peruse. So we'll use the raw data that we have just now looked at. We will open the file. We will let it attach to ChatGPT. And then we are going to write the prompts for calculating the sentiment polarity, calculating subjectivity, and thereafter, we are going to also look at a basic predictive model that we can generate from using ChatGPT, and also how ChatGPT can also provide us with the code that we can run ourselves in order to do the predictive modeling. And while we do all of this, we will try a few different types of prompts, some with more information, some with less information provided to ChatGPT, and we want to understand and compare the responses that we get from ChatGPT and how they are different when we change the prompts that we provide. So first, since I have just uploaded the data here, I would want ChatGPT to give me a list of all the columns from the dataset. So I'll simply write it down as a question that I would generally put to somebody who's familiar with the dataset. So I simply write down my query. You can hit enter after typing in your query, or you can click on this arrow. This is what we see is a list of all the different headers for the columns in our dataset. Now, this is useful. Why? Because we need to understand what are the names of the fields that we have. This is a short enough data set, so we can open the file and look at the column headers and see exactly which one we want to work with. But in case you have a large data set with multiple columns, it might not always be possible for you to remember exactly what the column headers are. So a simple prompt that we have just now put in can help us extract the column names. Now we know for certain review text is the column that we are going to focus on. Now, as I've mentioned in the slide, when we calculate the polarity scores, they generally are between the range of -1 and 1. So next prompt that I put in for ChatGPT to calculate the polarity scores for review text, I will try two different prompts. The first one, where I'm not going to specify the range between which it should fall. And in the second case, we are going to specify exactly what would be the range between which ChatGPT should calculate the polarity scores. And we don't only want to calculate the polarity scores because we want to use this data later on for purpose of predictive modeling. We would want to also attach for each of the reviews in the review text column their corresponding polarity score as a new column in our Excel file. So there are a few stages in which we are going to prepare the prompt. First, we will tell ChatGPT to calculate the sentiment polarity score for review text column in the attached dataset. Next, we will ask ChatGPT to add the polarity scores as a new column in the data file. We also would like to be able to have the Excel file in a downloadable form at the end of the calculation of polarity scores. So add in an additional instruction in your prompt. Give me the updated Excel file in a downloadable Excel format. So as you can see, the sentiment polarity scores have been calculated for the review text column and added as a new column named sentiment polarity, where the name has been given by ChatGPT automatically. And it's providing the updated Excel file in the downloadable Excel format. In order to go forward with the analysis, we also intend to calculate the subjectivity scores. Whether the reviews were written with more personal words or they were more objective, we want to get a score between 0 and 1 on the subjectivity. So we will add one more prompt before we download the file that we are later on going to use for the purpose of predictive modeling. Like before, we will plug in the prompt asking ChatGPT to calculate the subjectivity score for the review text column in the attached data file. Add the subjectivity score as a new column to the updated downloadable Excel file, because we want the updated file to contain both the polarity score as well as the subjectivity score. And after updating it, we would want updated data file in a downloadable Excel file. So here we have a new Excel file from the Trustpilot reviews that we have used as the base file that we uploaded. Now the updated file contains the sentiment polarity as well as subjectivity. Now, before we open the Excel file and take a look at this, we would want ChatGPT to give us some basic descriptive analysis or EDAs on the data file that it has just now calculated. We might want to look at a breakup of the sentiments as a proportion of the entire corpus into percentage positive, percentage negative, and percentage neutral. We need to put in a prompt and ask ChatGPT to create a pie chart showing percentage of positive, negative, and neutral sentiment reviews in the data file. Now we wait for the results. We have a PNG created based on the sentiment distribution through a pie chart. And we're going to take a look at this. This is the PNG generated automatically by ChatGPT. And as we can see from the review corpus, more than 50%, to be exact, 53.4% of the reviews were positive, 21.4% were negative, and about 25.2% were neutral. So a simple chart of this kind can be generated from a text corpus that we ask ChatGPT to analyze, get the calculated sentiment scores, and from there classify them based on the score values into the three classification categories and prepare the PDFs of or the PNG of the pie chart. We can similarly look at the generation of pie chart showing percentage of high and low subjectivity reviews from the dataset. Show the pie chart. Because we do not want to download another PNG, you can add that as a prompt. Show the pie chart in the response and not in the form of a downloadable file. So here we have a pie chart showing us that about 53.4% of the reviews were low subjectivity and 46.6% were high subjectivity. And what's important here is if you look at the prompt engineering, please follow in each of the steps how the prompts are basically generated based on what our requirement is. We try to give ChatGPT as much clarity as possible as per the requirement that we have. And also, for any other specific type of output, for instance, here we didn't want a downloadable file, we just wanted to see the pie chart, the EDA in the response. So, as a means of conversation, we can simply type out the prompt and ChatGPT accordingly modifies its response. So going forward, now we can look at the data set and see how exactly the subjectivity and the sentiment polarity scores have turned out to be. So here we have a data which is now updated from the original data file that we had. We only had the reviewer name, reviewer country code. Now the new updated Excel file has two new columns. One is the sentiment polarity, the other is sentiment and the subjectivity. So basically this is the subjectivity score, this is the sentiment score. As you would see, here we have some which are negative, which means they are negative reviews. We have some which are zeros exactly, which are neutral, and there are some which are positive. These are the positive reviews. If you specifically look at the corresponding text, this is a negative sentiment review. So as you can see in the text here, I've never been so disappointed in a company. I can't believe you guys are sellouts and so on and so forth. So the negative tone is quite evident. Likewise, in this review, which happens to have a positive sentiment score, we see positive tone. I love the original Neutrogena Hydro Boost formula. I give it a 5-star review. The formula is nowhere near as good as, and the texture is totally different. So, we are mostly talking about extracting the sentiment scores as positives or negatives in the form of exact numeric numbers, which can be used for predictive modeling. So, ChatGPT has been quite useful so far. At the same time, if you simply want to look at the breakup of your corpus of text, we've also seen how to do that through ChatGPT. Either you can get the response in the form of a downloadable file, or you can just look at it in the form of the response that we've just now done for our subjectivity breakup. Now, since we have extracted a few numeric variables like subjectivity score and polarity score, we want to understand whether it's possible for us to predict the review score that has been given by the customers, whether they match up with the kind of sentiment polarity that they have expressed and the subjectivity that they have expressed through their review text. So for that, we will go back to the list of the variables just to peruse and understand which exactly will be our response variable. So we are talking about review scores, the seventh variable here, which is on a scale of 1 to 5. We want to use it as the y variable or the response variable, and we want to see whether we can use subjectivity and polarity to understand what kind of impact they have on the final review scores. The review score here is categorical. It's numeric, but these are numbers that represent 5 different categories of satisfaction. In case we want ChatGPT to fit a predictive model of its choice, we should put in the prompt without any specification about the type of response variable it is trying to predict. So I'll put in the prompt as fit a suitable predictive model to predict review score based on the sentiment, polarity, and subjectivity from the Excel file. Now you would notice here that since we didn't specify anything in the prompts, it has assumed review scores, which is in the form of numbers, to be a numeric variable, and its natural choice was linear regression model, predicting review scores based on sentiment polarity and subjectivity. And as an output, we can see that it's providing us with the intercept, the coefficient for polarity, coefficient for subjectivity, as well as the R square to understand the goodness of the fit. Now, based on the output that we have here, we do not know whether polarity and subjectivity were significant or not in the model. So we want a detailed output from fitting the regression model. So we will put in our prompt accordingly. Provide the complete output from the regression model fitted to predict review scores based on sentiment, polarity, and subjectivity. And to be specific, you can also mention give the t standard error, t values, and the p values in the output. So here is the complete output that you would see when you fit a regression model. We have an R square, we have the adjusted R square, the intercept, sentiment polarity, subjectivity, their coefficients, polarity is positive, subjectivity is negative, the standard errors given, t and the p-value. Now, when we look at this, we understand by looking at p-value that sentiment polarity happens to be significant, whereas subjectivity is not. Now, if you want an interpretation written for this output, you can also accordingly provide the prompt for that. And you can also modify the prompt if you have a particular target audience for the interpretation. So I could put in the prompt of asking ChatGPT to give me an interpretation of the output above, which can be understood by a layperson, and we will see that it's exactly given us the interpretation of sentiment polarity, subjectivity, what we found of their impact on review scores, and it's written in absolutely non-technical words because we did mention that the interpretation should be understood by a layperson who doesn't understand all the technicalities of fitting a regression model. Whereas if I modify the prompt and ask for the regression output for a graduate student in statistics. You would notice at the very onset, it automatically starts with the terms like OLS regression output, which is more easily understandable by somebody who is studying statistics, who is a graduate student in statistics. And we also see the mathematical form of the equations and also all the other technical details like the R squares, adjusted R squares, the F statistic for testing the overall significance of the model, and so on and so forth. So basically, here we have fitted the linear regression model, not we, but ChatGPT automatically has chosen linear regression as the model of choice. However, you can also specify that it's categorical with 5 categories. Now fit a suitable model to predict review scores based on polarity and subjectivity. And you would notice that the lag time between the response in case of slightly more complicated prompts, as you keep on making the prompts more and more complicated, more and more rigorous, the time it takes for ChatGPT to analyze and come up with a suitable response also increases. So here we mentioned specifically that the review score is categorical. Hence, the natural next choice was multinomial logistic regression model. And having fitted the model, we can see most of the classification report is presented here with the precision, recall, F1 score, and so on. We also have the confusion matrix, which gives us an idea of how many were correctly classified, how many misclassified into the 5 categories. And we also have the interpretation. And like before, you can also try different prompts asking for the interpretation, which would be suitable for layperson, which is absolutely not technical, to a grad student, to a researcher, and so on and so forth. You can go back and forth and try multiple iterations of these different prompts. Also, since this is categorical as well as ordinal data, now we can ask specifically ChatGPT fit an ordinal regression to predict review scores based on polarity and subjectivity. And here we have an ordinal logistic regression, the proportional odds model for predicting the review scores based on sentiment polarity and subjectivity. This is the table of output. These are the coefficients. A summary is given for the understanding of a graduate student because that was the most recent prompt provided by us for interpretation of predictive models. However, going forward, you can now modify your prompt in order to generate interpretation for people with different levels of understanding. So essentially what we have achieved here through this tutorial today is at least to get you started on the type of conversation you can have with ChatGPT. We've specifically looked at a textual data. We've tried to extract metrics from the text and thereafter use it in a predictive model. However, each piece of these exercise can also be taken apart separately and worked upon through ChatGPT. So if you just require to understand the nature of the data through EDA and you have a textual corpus, so you can look at the text, you can extract the metrics and look at some charts and graphs, other forms of EDA. Or if you're essentially only looking for predictive modeling, then ChatGPT can help you fit the model, understand the interpretation at different levels of understanding based on what kind of prompt you're plugging in, what your requirement is, which can be done for textual data as well as for structured data. However, the caveat is if you do not have a paid version of ChatGPT, you might not be able to attach a very large data file and ask ChatGPT to fit your predictive model. However, you can still ask ChatGPT to generate a complete R code to fit an ordinal logistic regression model to predict review scores based on polarity and subjectivity. And ChatGPT will provide you with the code that you can locally run on your RStudio in order to fit a predictive model to your data set. And as you can see, the code generated by ChatGPT also comes with these snippets of notes. So it's also pretty easy to follow and understand exactly what each of these steps are doing. So all you have to do is copy the code onto your RStudio or any other editor that you're using and run your regression model. And if you're more comfortable working with Python code, the same can be done or generated through ChatGPT as well. I hope this tutorial was helpful. In case you are interested in knowing more about this or have any doubts about what we have discussed so far, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact details are shared on the last slide of our presentation. Thank you so much.